Welcome back to the Female Dating Strategy, the meanest female-only dating podcast on the internet. I am your host, Diana.
And I am Rose. And before we get started today with our wonderful, scintillating potpourri of issues that we're going to address, Diana, I wondered if I need to apologize to you for just how low and dark I was last week. Was I absolutely unbearable in that last week's episode? If so, I really do apologize.
No. I mean, look, life is shitty. Cycles happen. You're not supposed to be happy every single day of the week. You're a human.
What?
Allow yourself to be a human being. And sometimes it's okay to be in a bad mood. And this is a justified situation in which to be in a bad mood, like, to be very honest with you,
Okay. You're being very generous. I appreciate that graciousness.
Yeah, I would chill out because we got shit forward. You know what I mean? We've got stuff going on that we're going to have to deal with together. And sometimes you just need rest, emotional rest, not just physical, but emotional rest. You can't always be at 100 every week. So no apology needed. You had to do what you had to do. And you know what? Sometimes I think it's really good to be vulnerable and do it low, because I think people expect that we're just supposed to be this positive ray of fucking sunshine all the time. And I don't know where you got that I'm the positive ray of fucking sunshine, because I come on this podcast every week after week, spouting incredibly ruthless shit. So I'm very forgiving of people being in a bad mood.
I am the Pollyanna of my world, but you're right. I don't always have to be sort of in that mode, especially if there is actual real world shit going down. And I am human. That's a really good reminder. And I think this was something last week when I had said to you before we get started, I was like, listen, I've got like 45 minutes tops, max.
That's fine.
And I was so proud of myself, because that's the first time I've ever been like, maybe I can't do like X amount of energy or hours. Like, can we just limit it? And that's the new step for me. So dear listeners, take note. I'm 43 and I'm still learning and adapting and working to really better my life on my own terms. And that's, I think, a lot about what we're discussing today. Is we're doing this like potpourri of post-election thoughts. And one of the things we were talking about before we got on here was like, how as we get older and we learn to value ourselves more, value our own energy and care that we give to people, we often want to become more discerning about who it goes to, so that we're not just, pouring from an empty cup or like pouring into a bucket with a hole in the bottle. So it's just eternally trying to fill it, and it never will. But before we get started with everything else, Diana was telling me this fantastic anecdote before we started. Diana, would you fill us in on that?
Yeah. So, we were talking about how individuals, we live through a cycle of different stages of life, and how as a collective right now, we're probably feeling like, it's not just the States, right? That's the reason why last week I really understood, because every country in the world is going through like an extreme right-wing shift, and because of like the cyclical way in which the world is run, there's lots of like lore from different religions and cultures about like why things have to be really shitty before they start getting better again. Like, I was just talking to Rose about what Hindus believe, which is essentially that the world is broken down into 4 stages, and it goes into like basically a golden age, a silver age, a bronze age, and then the age that we're in right now, which is like the iron age. And the iron age is supposed to be the roughest stage because it's the end of the cycle. So we believe that, the 4 cycles keep rotating. And the first cycle, the golden age, is amazing. That lasts like, how long does it last again? Like 17 million, a million years, like almost 2 million years. And then like the bronze age is like 1.2 million years. And then the third age, the bronze age is 800,000 years. And the age that we're in right now is 432,000 years. So we are in like year 4,000 of 432,000 years of shit.
Say it ain't so. Say it ain't so. Shit.
Yeah. Actually, no, we're 5,125. My bad.
Oh, even better. Great, Diana.
So the point of the cycle is that basically they say that in the beginning, when it's the golden age, things are really good. But it's kind of like that concept of like good times create lazy people create hard times create like strong men. Like, I've seen that pop up on the internet a little bit, but basically that all of human life, not just like your own personal life, but like what we go through as a collective happens in cycles. And like this stage is like essentially priming itself up to be cleansed. So you're in this stage for the longest time, and then God resets the cycle and it goes back to the beginning. So like we have had multiple cycles of this exact cycle, essentially. And lots of cultures have this belief that like you go through like essentially what is a dark age. And then the dark age is when, morals are broken down, societal trust is eroded, lots of crime happens, a lot of just negativity, a lot of hopelessness. And it's an age that goes away as well, right? We spend time in that age, like, and when you start thinking about the way that Hindus think about life is that, you're in an eternal cycle anyway. So this is one of many lives you've already lived. So, you're not going to remember how many times you've had to do this, but the soul keeps the count, essentially, right? And I think that if there's any message of hope in here is that if you are going through this right now, you have, I mean, at least from the Hindu perspective, you have been through this many, many times before.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about how in philosophy, like Nietzsche coined the eternal return, which is basically, the same things happen over and over again. You're constantly learning from the same sorts of painful circumstances and situations you find yourself in. And I just think it's so funny that everybody's like, oh, Nietzsche, the eternal return, it's so brilliant. And it's like, he got this shit from Hinduism. Like, can we please point that out? But the idea is that these concepts are sort of eternal and transcend cultures and religions and time itself. And something else you were mentioning before we got started was that one of your friends, a Native American friend, read your indigenous cards.
She read my medicine cards, yeah. So basically, what I thought was very interesting when we had this discussion about doing my medicine cards was when she talked about how Native Americans have a concept of a cycle as well. And one of the cards that she pulled for me in my medicine cards was that of the whale, and she called the whale the record keeper of the ancients. And it's essentially this creature that has outlived most human beings and has been with us since the beginning of our evolution as a people. So it's not just our biological evolution, but the evolution of our humanity. And this is something that I thought was very similar to certain concepts in Hinduism as well, because Hinduism, I mean, if you've seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, you know that they got a lot of it from Hinduism. But essentially, it's like when the dark age comes upon us, there's going to be like an avatar who comes in to clean the shit up. It's essentially God.
Oh, like the Jesus figure? Okay, the Jesus figure.
Yeah, yeah. But he doesn't come to rescue the world. He comes to destroy the world. Hinduism is very, much more severe.
Yeah, this is why I like Kali. I'm always like, yes, Kali, goddess of destruction and renewal. That they go hand in glove.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. In Hinduism, death has a lot to do with rebirth. It has a lot to do with the coming of a new season. So death is not really seen as the ending of something, but as the beginning of a new cycle. So, where we are emotionally, I think we should start seeing it less as the death of something and more as the renewal and the new season of something. And so the animals that came forward in my medicine reading were basically talking about this new renewal, essentially that there's going to be like a long winter ahead of us and that I have to gather my resources and use my talents in a way that is preparing for this long winter so that I can, essentially bloom in the new season. And so, when we're looking at how destructive our societies are becoming, it's very easy, I think, to become morose and become incredibly depressed and say, this is just the end of society as we know it. And in some ways, that is both a good thing and a bad thing, because I think that it's the beginning of a new cycle as well. And if you start seeing death more as rebirth, it's the death of something that had to die in order for like new shit to come on board. You needed to cleanse out the garbage. It's essentially spring cleaning. The season of time that we're in Hinduism is essentially the spring cleaning of humanity. So it's going to collapse, but it's going to collapse to be something much better. And I think that that's what we have to start seeing things as well, because we already know just purely based off observation and how we're dealing with other people that the system that we have in place and the way that society is set up right now worldwide is just not sustainable. And we know that because women around the world are protesting in their own way. And a lot of women, like, here's the thing about what men say is natural to women. And this is something that we heard even from Dr. Ashley Davley talking about how animals behave as well, right? What they assume is natural. Why does that have to be socially conditioned? If it was naturally occurring, most women would crave partnership and children, and most women would be actively striving to improve the birth rates of their country. But as it stands, there's a lot of countries in which women are not being inspired to do that because they can see that the life that they're leading is untenable. And that's natural. I think that has very little to do with social conditioning. I don't believe every woman is on the internet listening to FDS and being like, I want a high value man.
More's the pity.
No, not at all, right?
Yeah, right.
We know that our message is rare and there's not a lot of people who are open to it.
That's exactly what I was thinking was like, when I talked about this, like sea changes, we are seeing a sea change of women. And it's not because of FDS, it's because they are looking at the facts on the ground. They're looking at the order or disorder of things. And they're opting out because it's not natural to bring a child into such a degenerate, diminishing culture, right? Like society is only getting more and more perilous, lawless, corrupt, especially when we have so few protections, anyways. Why would you even try to bring a defenseless child into the world under such circumstances? And women are not.
Women are not.
They're not because they see the writing on the wall. Now, all these men who are trying to say, like, get back in the kitchen and you need to start popping out these broods. And wasn't there somebody in South Korea who was like, we need to remove the uteruses of women over 30 so that women start giving birth more frequently? It's like, what the hell? How are these the conclusions you draw? Like, they are so far into Delulu land that they refuse to actually see what's happening for what it is. And women are just like, we're the practical ones here, right? We're the ones who are gauging, we're looking at the weather vane and we're like, shit's about to get real, if not even worse. Let's just opt out of imperiling ourselves further and imperiling an innocent new life. And you know what, women who are making this choice, I salute you. And I hope we can continue to build on this momentum because I think that's the only way we actually will see any sort of sea change. It has to reach a critical mass of women opting out for men to even start to say, like, I don't know, maybe we've got some things wrong, and that might not even happen, but that's not the point. We have to protect ourselves.
Yeah, I think that, there can be some level of individual discipline that leads to collective action. I don't know that that's necessarily something that will happen. But, one of the authors I really enjoy is James Baldwin. And he has this quote that I find really interesting, which is that, the world is held together by the love and passion of a very few people. And love is not a very popular movement because most people don't want to be free. And so we're kind of seeing that when it comes to the American elections and just in general, these like huge right wing shifts around the world because men and women ideologically are going in opposite directions. And America is not the only place where this is happening. We're seeing this globally. And I think a big part of it is that it's very true. Though, if I have to push, even farther into his quote, I would think the world is being held together by the love and passion of very few women, essentially, and very, very few people because they're the only ones who can see that there's absolutely no point in engaging with people in bad faith who are, determined to misunderstand you, determined to oppress you. There's no winning with those kinds of people. Like when I was younger, I felt like there was something you could do to change people, to persuade them. Like I felt like I had to be like evangelizing people on the merits of love. Like I was a missionary of that particular philosophy. And I realized very early on that, yeah, there's a reason that evangelizing people doesn't work because they really have to be ready to hear that message and come at it with some kind of sincerity. If they are being pushed to, if they're being peddled to, if they feel like they're being marketed to, most people don't come at it and engage with it it's like buyer's remorse, you know what I mean? Like they may be charmed by the way you deliver a message, but then when they actually look at the practical mechanics of it, like that ends up falling apart very quickly. It's like when all these people ended up buying Stanley cups and they were like, did I actually need this fucking cup? Like, why? And no other cup do. And sure, there are probably some people who genuinely derive enjoyment from buying the Stanley Cup because that's their cup. That's the cup that they wanted. But to say that it's like something every single person would need to be happy is just marketing. And that's the thing, right? Like we are presenting this version of what it takes to be happy to people who may not really agree with it and may actually have different needs. And we don't acknowledge those needs. And I don't think society is prepared to address those needs either. And so, you are seeing these men who are like, maybe if we just went back to when things were simpler, which I think is also very stupid because it was never simpler. You know what I mean? It was never simpler. The life that they're trying to go back to was actually a life where their grandfathers endured a lot of hardship. They romanticize their ancestors' struggles. And so coming back to my medicine card for a little bit, the point of the whale was essentially to say that this is an animal that has been keeping a record of humankind way before humans even really understood what it meant to be human. And it talks about a great calamity that befell the people that ended up leading them to come into Turtle Island, essentially. There was a huge calamity that resulted in like many people migrating to what is now North America. And because of that calamity, they all had to band together in order to form community. And so what the whale reminds us of is the story of the ancients, which is that history essentially rhymes. It may not repeat, but it rhymes. And it asks of us to form community with other people again. Because should there be another huge calamity, which is very likely considering the way that our environment is right now, we will need each other again. We will need unity again. We will have to find a way to unite in very, very dire circumstances. And there have been horrible circumstances before this where people have had to do that already. Like people had to do that in World War II. People had to do that in all sorts of different wars. So it's not that it's impossible, it's that a lot of what is possible really just comes down to belief.
So true. I do like your quote about, and I think you've mentioned this quote by from Baldwin a couple of times about the world being held together by the love and care of a very few, love and passion of very few. And this is something that, if I may humbly assert, I do think a lot of our FDS girlies are on that train. We're not withholding love. This was a point I wanted to make before. For me, sometimes it's very difficult to cut off people who I feel, compelled to care for, or I feel like some sort of obligation to them. And I used to think I was obligated to the whole world. Like the world was lacking in love and care, and I had so much I needed to bring it. But of course, I got burnt out. I got burnt. I ended up in some really precarious situations because I just wasn't being discerning enough. And so, one thing I was saying to Diana was that I really had to switch my mentality from you need to withhold, because that's not what I'm doing. What I'm doing is I'm reserving and I'm cultivating a discernment over who actually deserves these wonderful energies from me, because they're priceless, right? Like you can't pay someone to give what I am happy to give if there is merit there. And so what I'm seeing online is, I've been seeing an incredible meteoric rise in like, what is 4B? And everybody's talking, all the women are talking about 4B all of a sudden, which Diana, look at our prescience in our previous episode going over that. But again, for me, it's not like I don't want to be around men, period. It's like, I only will have men in my life who have this idea of generosity and mutuality around our relationship. If they are here strictly, like if they're only sending their representative, their best self, to like get me on the hook and then recede back into passive nothingness while I continue to, bring the best of me, that's not anything that brings value to my life. I'm simply not going to have it. And this is why I think we need to have this attitude more than ever. Like we're basically entering like an age of fascism, right? We've had a renewal of fascism because you know what? People want the trains to run on time and they want the egg prices to lower and they don't want to have to live next door to a black or brown person, right? They want to be able to legally discriminate and even to be rewarded for it. And so for the people who are making those choices, like, okay, well, they're going to have to live with the rotten fruits of their choices. But as for me and mine, I'm going to be doing my best to insulate us and to be building our own mutual aid societies, because it's really who we have around us that's going to make the biggest difference for us. Like I was saying to Diana, there's not much I can do on a national level right now. That's a shit show that's like beyond my ken or powers to affect any change. What I am doing is in my own life, I'm sort of doing like you said, a spring cleaning to see, who is doing their part in my life. And can I recognize those who maybe I need to distance myself a little bit, or maybe I'm just kind of growing into a different direction or into a different, healthier lifestyle that doesn't suit them. And so in that case, how do I prioritize or reassess where my energy needs to go in those sort of situations? And so I think for our listeners, many of you already know this, but like in an era of fascism, women are always the sacrificial lamb, right? We're the most vulnerable, women and children. We're the most vulnerable, we're the most valuable insofar as like who births and upbrings the new soldiers, right? Who are the handmaidens to like fascism? It always is women. I mean, as we just saw from like 53% of white women once again voted for the Orange Mussolini. And so this is something where if you were uncertain before about like the merits of being extremely ruthless in vetting, may this sort of act as a wake-up call to you to realize just how valuable you are and how preciously and fiercely you need to guard yourself, because you matter so much.
Yep. I think that we're at a stage now where we have to find ways to be productive in a way that makes sense and not exhausting, because at the end of the day, I think that, let me just bring up this thing about 4B for a second. I think what I'm seeing right now from a lot of women is, I hate to say it, but I think a lot of it is very reactionary. I don't believe it's coming from intention of like, I want to follow this, because the truth is, for those of us who knew about 4B for a very long time, like, I'm not a person who was like pro that movement in any way, in the sense that like I was like, oh my God, I'm going to wholesale adopt this ideology and live by it. But that's just how my life ended up panning out, because the mechanics of it just didn't work. You know what I mean? Like the only other alternative was to continue putting myself in a very mediocre dating pool, which I had no interest in. So just by virtue of like living my life, I was already living kind of a 4B existence. It didn't come with any pomp. There was no parade to my entering this sort of movement, it just came about as a result of like, what exactly is sustainable in my life right now? And what exactly is, bringing me joy? And so naturally, I was like, okay, I'm disinclined to pander to men because I see that as not a winning strategy. And also, it brings me in contact with a lot of men that are not good for me. And it is very exhausting to be around those kinds of men. Even with like good faith, even with being a very positive and optimistic thinker, it's not something that actually benefits me in any real way. And so I kind of came about like with to these like 4B principles just really merely by accident. And I never really thought of it as like, oh, I need to stick to this very strict ideology. It kind of just happened. What I'm really seeing with a lot of people is like something that's very reactive. It's like, oh, I'm pissed off. So like maybe we should have like a Lysistrata level of sex work. And it's like it was possible for those women because those women were not so easily distracted by the internet. I'm sorry, but there were fewer of them, and they were like, we're just gonna throw the men out. They're at war, and we're gonna tell them we'll never sleep with them again. And all these Greek women banded together and got shit done. And it's very possible in South Korea because, I mean, they consider themselves in a weird way to be an island because they have an enemy in the north, and so they are kind of isolated and cut off from everyone else. So where the fuck are South Korean men gonna go? Like the K dramas are only gonna do so much for you. At some point, you will have to speak English to your lover. You know what I mean? Not every single woman is gonna learn Korean in order to get you laid. So, you know what I mean? So like there's a limitation there that's already in place where the women can exert some level of control in keeping the men in line. Now, whether that's an effective strategy or not, we will have to see long-term data to be determined, right? But I think that when we come to these reactionary sort of politics, it's like you're not coming at this with any real sincerity because the first second a good-looking man smiles at you and winks at you, you're like back to square one. So really only come to these movements if you plan on having the agenda of staying, because otherwise there's really no point. And so it comes back down to okay, now that the reactionary stage of everybody's anger is going to pass, which will pass because, like all seasons, there is a season for this and it will pass. Then you have to think about, well, what else can I do? Because if you're still intending on dating, then vetting becomes even more important because, going back to the point I made earlier, a lot of men around the world are right wing. I'm hearing a lot of American women be like, I'm going to leave America and go to France where I'm going to have my Emily in Paris moment. And it's like, did the French girls warn you?
Right? They have warned you if you've been listening.
Have the Korean women warned you? Like all these people who are sitting and consuming this media with absolutely no, ground reality of like what men are like in other countries. I'm sorry to break it to you, but men are misogynistic as fuck everywhere. And a lot of them have these ideologies or worse. And what we're seeing even in America is that overwhelmingly men voted for Trump of all kinds of backgrounds, of all kinds of races, of all kinds of financial incomes. All of them were pretty adamantly like, this is a guy that's going to give us what we want. So, yeah, sure, it's in our best interest to elect him. Right. I think a lot of men, like from what I know of women who are dating online, like a lot of them were saying that men straight up lie. I mean, of course they do. They straight up lie about their politics on these dating apps because, well, it's easy to pull a fast one on you. You want to believe what you want to believe, He's like, oh, I'm super progressive. Here's my picture of me reading Andrea Dworkin,
No, yeah. There he is reading Bill Hooks. And this is true. I think it's been very hard for me to accept this. I think this is something for others to also take seriously into consideration. Men lie without compunction. They consider it part of their tool of persuasion. I don't think they even really think of it as lying. They just think of it as, I will say what I have to say to get what I want. And it's their fault that I can't get what I want unless I say it this certain way. Okay? Even if they get caught in a lie, they're like, well, if you had just been willing to listen, they're always going to have an excuse because ultimately it's to whatever serves their ends. And that's why so many of them overwhelmingly voted for an idiot. I mean, an absolute clown, a clown show. And we're already seeing it with like the pics and people are like, oh, how dare he? Who could even imagine? It's like, well, this is, you know what? I'm not even going to get into this because like I could have imagined easily because he'd already shown us who he was. But all this is to say is like, you're right. All these women who are coming at it from a reactionary perspective or saying like, do I divorce my husband? I found out he voted for Trump. It's like, honey, wake up. Okay. You listen, you might have to stay in a situation because of XYZ, but please take off these blinders that are keeping reality from you. I mean, because if you're unwilling to deal with reality, you will never exit the dream world of your own creation. And here's the other side of that, Diana, is many women and many people in general don't want to, right? It's easier, it's safer, to simply remain in that land where they can just believe whatever lie is told to them because it's easier than having to be critical and ruthless and, constantly discerning fact from fiction. And that's, I think, exactly why we ended up in the situation that we're in currently.
Yep, and many people are honestly in a position of like this is going back to the point that Baldwin made about people don't really want freedom. They don't really like having agency. They want to be told what to do and they want to be told what to believe in. And like at some point you will have to choose for yourself. Like a lot of women are like, "Oh, can I join 4B and still like date my man?" And it's like, are you understand?
Absolutely not.
You don't have to do the 4B thing, right? Like you're not going to be like the least popular girl at the cafeteria if you don't. You know what I mean? Like nobody cares. These online movements are just that, they're online. I mean, they are applicable to the people who come from those nations for whom they actually end up changing shit because again, they're unified in their messaging and they're unified in their ideals. If you don't share these ideals, you don't have to adopt them. You know what I mean? Like, but you need to be practical and smart about who you let into your life anyway, because that is just common sense. And what do we say? Like, make common sense common again. We said this in the first episode and we're saying it again now. Please make common sense common again. If this is not applicable to you, like, I mean, I follow 4B and I'd never intended to. You know what I mean? I never came at it with like, oh, I'm following this movement. It just so happened that my life was conveniently set up that way. And now I don't need to deal with a man if I don't want to, you know?
It's true. When I first started to read about it, I was like, oh, wait, that's how I live my life. Like it ended up coinciding with the movement. It was not something that I voluntarily followed because I had already been setting up my life in such a way.
Yeah, I didn't choose it. I didn't choose it as an expression of my politics. I chose it as an expression of my authentic self. Like, this is just who I am naturally. It has nothing to do with, like, I'm following an ideology and stuff. If it inconveniences men, good. I mean, I wasn't trying to be convenient. You know what I mean? Like, if
Exactly.
anything, I derive great joy from making their life difficult. I think they could stand to have a little bit more difficulties in life. So I'm happy to help on that front. I'm happy to make it difficult for you to have access to me. I'm fine with that.
Make it difficult for men again. And you know what? It's so true. It's like I didn't choose the 4B movement. The 4B movement chose me, you know?
I didn't choose the thug life. The thug life chose me. Real gangsters move in silence, as they say.
That's right. I was already moving silently, I guess I'm a gangster. But so it's been weirdly gratifying, but also weirdly annoying. And this is me and all my feelings and like all my terrible human messiness because I'm like reading all these things from women. And, this is where I get really, really petty sometimes, where I'm just like, you had to have known. The only reason you didn't know is because you weren't listening. And now that it's going to affect you, not just, your fellow women or anybody else other than you. Now that it's going to affect you, now you care. And that it's so hard for me not to be judging that. Just like why don't you care about people beyond just yourself? I don't understand it.
You know what was crazy? I saw someone post something like, I always knew men hated us, but I didn't know they hated us this much. And it's like, you didn't? What do you mean?
I know! What?
They were, where have you been? It's not like they've been trying to hide it. You know what I mean? They've been.
What rock have you been hiding under? Yeah, exactly. Especially in this era of like online discourse, which was something else we were going to touch on this conversation, was like the online discourse, the rancor, like vehement disdain, the contempt, like the quickness, with a quickness they had so many new quotes, to throw in our faces, like your body, my choice, right? That came up real quick. And it's just like, this is not something that has just like recently popped up for these men. They have been steeping in it for millennia. So when we talk about like how to vet, Diana, we've talked about some of the more overt things that we have to vet for, but like, what are maybe some things that it's easy to miss? Like we're talking about like, oh, how could you have missed that he voted for Trump? But there might be smaller things that we could also be looking out for that maybe we just tend to overlook because we're trying to find the grand, big red flags.
I think that two of the things we need to acknowledge is that men, like they have already taken the temperature of what is going on and they're aware of the fact that women are pissed off. Okay. And, this is where it comes back to the point about like Andrea Dworkin talking about left-wing men, right-wing men, it makes no difference. Like they just defer on what they, like one thinks that women are public property and one thinks that women are property. And really they are equally misogynistic. There's really no distinction between the two of them. But the leftists are going to know that women are pissed off because Trump won. Like both sides, I think, are going to try to be a lot more sneaky about how they worm their way in because sexual access to is still very important to them. And now that women are pissed off, it's at least temporarily, a little bit harder for them to gain access. I mean, a lot of these women, I hate to say, is pure copium and pure talk of like, I'm never going to sleep with a man again. Because if you were about that energy, you've been doing it already. You know what I mean? Like, there's no giant wake up call. If you do not have sexual discipline, you're not suddenly going to start exhibiting Olympic athlete levels of dedication to your sexual. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not going to
It's so
happen.
true.
You know, you got to crawl before you walk, and you got to walk before you run and do gymnastics like you're fucking Simone Biles of the sexual Olympics. You know what I mean? It's not going to happen. Just give it up. It's fine to have it as like something you want to adopt, but just know that if you didn't come at it with this energy before, it's not going to be like an overnight thing that I just suddenly go cold turkey. Like for a lot of women, this is very hard. Like disengaging from men when you're very used to pandering to them is not going to be something that just happens overnight, you know? Because it really takes a very long time for you to basically rid yourself of that mindset. And you're always going to go back because the fears that society feeds you is going to keep coming back of like, oh, well, what if you wind up alone? And what if you don't get married? And what if you don't have children? Like, this is always going to haunt you. So unless you learn to like just not give a shit about it, which takes time, you're not going to suddenly adopt this like very hardline stance against men, which leaves you vulnerable to their attacks. Okay, so one aspect of it is that, yes, they are going to lie a lot more to get what they want. And two is that the ones who did vote for him are also going to be very cagey because they know it's not going to get them laid. And so they're going to be a lot more intelligent about how they lie to women now. I do think it's still probably easier to catch them. It's like whenever you're on like the FDS forums, we could always tell when a man was like live action role playing because they just don't know women that well. And like they say these things that are like a dead giveaway all the time. And you know, if I had to give like an example, it's like, okay, you know, any direct questions about his politics is going to give you an answer that you want to hear, you know? What we suggested when it came to like discovering a man's porn use, for example, was to pretend like you were into porn and ask him like as a casual question, like, oh, what kind of porn are you into? Like, let's just guard down and makes him think you're one of the cool girls. And sometimes it's very good to employ the cool girl strategy to be like, you know, I so love our president-elect, Mr. Trump. I just love his book, The Art of the Deal. And I think he's got such great ideas. And if his reaction is like, oh my God, are you fucking crazy? Like, here's the thing, like somebody who is genuinely a Trumper will be very happy about you talking about him in a positive manner because he's not going to think that you're lying. Because he's lying, right? He's lying to get laid. He's lying. He's not thinking about your lies. He's thinking about his own lies. He's trying to keep his story straight. You know, so I think that, you know, you need to, like, not everybody is going to volunteer information about their politics to you, especially because they know at this stage that women are going to be very upset about it. And so they're not going to directly tell you that they voted for X, Y, and Z. Like, I mean, this is not always going to be a guaranteed strategy of, like, if you tell him you like Trump, that he's going to suddenly volunteer that he's into Trump as well. Because some of them are still intelligent enough to know to play along and pretend and push back. And if they're genuinely one of those leftist guys who's like, I'm a nice guy, I read bell hooks. Like, I mean, I'm not going to say that those men are any better because those men can be just as equally misogynistic. I think ultimately what it comes down to is to find out things in a much more neutral sort of way and find out what he feels about certain topics in a very roundabout way of asking his politics. Not like directly like, oh, did you vote for Trump or did you vote for, like, what did you feel about this election and stuff? But things that are target issues like, you know, seeing a homeless guy. You know, how does he react to homeless people? Ask him about, like, you know, does he volunteer? Like, what does he do for fun? You know, what does he do as a hobby? Does he spend his time in community with other people? Also, you have to watch out for men who have very antisocial sort of hobbies. We talked about this in the hobby episode as well, about like, you know, indoor men, outdoor men, the ones who go to the gym versus the ones who are like sitting and playing video games. I have found a lot of like the video game men to be incredibly antisocial. So, I mean, it's not a red flag in and of itself, though to some women it might be. I think it's in combination with other activities that are also very insular is when you have to start watching out for him being kind of like an online chronic guy. Because sometimes I see these takes that they have online and I'm like, this is clearly the words of a man who has never stepped outside his house. Because he truly believes this bullshit. Like, he's like, every woman is on the cock carousel. She's fucking like 50 guys. And like every woman has a body count of like 250. And I'm like, 250?
Where did you get these data, right? And it's like, oh, it's online, so that means it must be true. And here's the thing, you know, I really like this idea of being much more circumspect in how you present ideas, sort of like as a fishing expedition, because like Diana says, I mean, they lie, they're going to continue to lie. It's like, if it's going to get them what they want, they're absolutely going to do that. And so this idea of like, you know, oh, what kind of porn do you watch? Like, that's a great one. That's been an FDS approved one for quite some time. I think another one that has occurred to me while you're talking is like, I don't know about you, but I have plenty of friends who are single mothers and were absolutely screwed over by their husbands or boyfriends or baby daddies. And Have you ever actually brought up like those sorts of situations? Like, oh my gosh, my sister's having such a hard time. Like her ex-husband to actually like pay for these kids' sporting activities, even though it's like part of the divorce settlement. Just kind of bitch and moan about that and see where he takes it. Because I swear to God, they have a burning hatred for single mothers, which is the weirdest thing ever. But so many of them, that is like a flashpoint, or even just like make up a friend of yours who was literally assaulted and listen to how he responds to it, because so many of them give themselves away in these situations. They'll be like, oh well, she was out at a bar late at night, like sorry, but like everybody knows, so many of them, that's when it will slip out, right? Because they love to be able to blame a woman after she's been punished, quote unquote, for daring to exist while female. So these are incidents where like you might be able to have things revealed to you in a very sort of roundabout, casual way without having to put yourself in danger, or really just eliciting the most obvious lie, like, who did you vote for? He's not going to say Trump. Even if you say you voted for Trump, like Diana said, so many of them, they're going to play the long game. And so, like, we have to be willing to play the longer game, essentially, right? You've got to have patience with these guys because, they have a millennia of all learning all these tricks. Boy Talk is all about sharing, how they can fuck us over, how they can confuse us, how they can like ameliorate our concerns temporarily so that they can get what they want and then, abscond or further continue to exploit you. Like, this is what they share. They always talk about women gossiping. Men are the biggest gossips. This is all projection. Are you kidding me?
Also, like, they brought in a two-pronged approach of electing him because on one hand, yes, they knew that women were going to be upset about it, but now they're going to be a lot more diabolical about the way that they lie to get to you. And if that fails, they have the legislative, basically the backing of human society and the government behind them to get what they want. So men have always played chess and you are playing checkers, okay? Men have ensured that, yeah, sure, in the group of men you date, there might be the Republican guys, the men who are lying about being Republican, and leftist guys who are basically also sometimes very low value. I'm not of this impression that automatically just because someone is from the left, he's going to be like this great sweetie pie, because the misogyny that they are cooked under that soup, it hits them all the exact same. Okay, they're all cooked in the same boiling water, and until I have evidence to prove that they are above those things, like they genuinely do care about the well-being of women in their lives, like I am not concerned with just automatically giving somebody the benefit of the doubt just purely based on like some political ideals that he has. Like some
Right.
of them are just sexual leftists, you know what I mean? They hold these like left-wing ideals just to try to get laid. Like it has nothing to do with whether they believe in it or not.
Or they want prostitution to be legal and you know what I mean? Things like that. Like that's why they're liberal.
Yeah. Or they want like a cookie for being us, like, barely decent human beings.
They all want that fucking cookie. I'm so tired of it. But it's so true though. And this is where I like your analogy of like they're playing chess and we're playing checkers, because this is why I always hype up, Diana, your ability to be ruthless and like your absolute glee in being as inconvenient as possible, because that really does separate the wheat from the chaff. Like a lot of these guys, they're looking for the easiest shortcut, like the quickest and easiest way to get you to do what they want, because they know typically by the time you sleep with them, they've basically got you emotionally locked in and everything is just downhill from there, And that's why we're always like, how he starts is how he means to go on. And so, and like you say, unless I have somebody who is simply extraordinary, like who is as extraordinary as I, they're not even going to get the time of day, like I'll give them a polite greeting and I'm moving on. And so that's something that I think we really need to start integrating into our vetting strategies, is just this like this knowledge and this deep wisdom that like men have been putting us in these untenable situations, whether it's legally, extrajudicially, governmentally, religiously, like they on all levels, they have got us hectored in. And just a quick, really disturbing stat. I think in the US, the rate of prosecution and conviction on sexual assaults that are reported, right? Reported sexual assaults. There are infinitely more sexual assaults that happen, but the ones that get reported and then prosecuted and then convicted, that figure is somewhere around 2 or 3%. In other words, rape is more or less legal. It's extra legal because they don't punish it. And the men know this. If they can just get you to their house or to your house or in their car, you have absolutely no protections. And so really understand that like you are so precious, you are so wonderful, you're so valuable. And women go get raped and go missing all the time. It happens every day. Pregnant women, the number one cause of their death is not actually birth, it's actually their partner killing them while they're pregnant. So, I mean, all of this has already been done terrible for us, and now it's about to get immeasurably worse. And so these are the things I want us to think about when we're like, oh, I just want to find a good man. Like we all do. If you're interested in finding a good man, like we're all there. But that's not what the considerations really have to be in this situation.
Mm-hmm. I think also, if I had to come up with a two-pronged strategy for us, the element of surprise is your best friend. Like the reason why men don't pull a fast on me is because they never see me coming. It's because I'm very good at creating an impression of stupidity and dumbness. And like I employ dumb fox a lot. I employ dumb fox a lot because I like men. I let them cook. Okay, let them talk. Men will reveal themselves in what they say. I just let them chat and I act so interested in what they have to say. And I'm very good at playing dumb. Also because I present as very feminine. So they're very eager to believe that I'm very stupid. So I never talk about my income. I never talk about what I do for work. I'm like, it's just some boring shit. I never talk about my accolades. I never talk about anything that could at all be perceived as a threat. I just have him explain shit to me about like the economy or politics. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. Like, tell me more. Then he will tell me where the bodies are hidden and when exactly he murdered them and everything because he genuinely thinks I'm interested. And because most men do not have to vet against you or protect against you in the way that we have to protect against them. They just think it's innocuous chit chat. They don't think that anything I say is something where I'm scrutinizing them. Right? So the element of surprise helps you there because sometimes I'll ask them a question that comes seemingly out of nowhere in our conversation and they haven't had time to come up with a cover story for that one.
Yeah. I love that. That's so clever. Because listen, Diana, I like that you're playing Sly Fox. I prefer not Dumb Fox, but Sly Fox.
Oh, you play smart by playing dumb. That's
yeah. Totally.
You know what I mean?
I think my equivalent would be like I have such a Midwestern like game girl, good old time, like I was telling somebody the other day, I was like, people tell me everything. I don't even ask. They just volunteer. And what I've learned is to listen. Because people, and men especially, will absolutely tell you who they are. If you're just paying attention, if you're just listening with a keen ear and like a relaxed, smiling expression, they will fucking tell you everything. Just make sure you're listening.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That's the thing, right? Like at the end of the day, if you ask them very direct questions, they will seem very loaded and they will seem very obvious. If you ask them like, oh, did you vote for Trump? Oh, what do you feel about this particular policy? What do you feel about abortion? What do you feel about women splitting 50-50? Regardless of what he personally believes, he's not going to be very honest with you. Because, I mean, even like these so-called left-wing men will come at me and be like, well, here's why I think 50-50 is fair, because it's just equal. And then I have to sit down and explain to them why it's not actually equal. And I'm like, why am I wasting my energy on this person? Understand that men who do 50-50 are in survival mode. He needs to get his shit together. You just leave him be, okay? He needs to survive. Pookie needs to go and get a job. So I don't sit and try to rescue them from their situation anymore. Because when I was in my 20s, I was like, maybe if I can rationalize this person and have them listen to reason, they will understand my point of view. They don't buy your point of view, not because of like the rationality of it. They don't buy your point of view because it's inconvenient to them. Understand the difference. They're not buying into your point of view because it's not logical. Of course it's logical. They're not buying into your point of view because it inconveniences them and it also removes them from your dating pool. And they don't want that. They want you to settle because that's how they get included. Which is easier, convincing women that they deserve less or asking men to aspire to more? One requires more effort from them.
So guess what the answer is going to be? And don't ever forget what Savannah, our beloved Savannah, has talked about. Affirmative action for men, okay? Basically, any relationship with women is affirmative action for men. So do you really just want to be giving that milk away for free, honey? Like, I mean, I hate that whole why buy the milk and the cow? And yeah, we all have heard that bullshit. But at the same time, there is a certain amount of truth in that. Like, any man is going to benefit from having you in his life, okay?
Yeah. I was just telling Rose this earlier that I had a conversation with a woman where I told her, I was like, oh, the men in my country are such princesses. I could never date them because I am used to and accustomed to a certain standard of being treated by men. And that includes the men in my life. Like right now, my uncle, my gay best friends, like all of the men who help make me money, like all of these men pour into me in a very specific way. And so I'm very used to being treated a certain way by men. And I don't really believe in having to sit and do this 50-50 bullshit with them. And pour into them to the expense of not having anything for myself. And this woman pushed back and she was like, no, well, I'm kind of like non-binary or whatever. So like, I'm okay with being the man in the relationship, which I thought was very strange because isn't that binary? And what the fuck does that mean? Because
it's absolutely gender essentialism right there. Okay.
Oh, yeah, and I was like, "What do you mean being a man in a relationship?" And the point is that she thought like generosity is this trait that women are supposed to have in abundance and men are not. I mean, that's not how she explained it, but that's how she implied it, right? And the truth is, what I pointed out to her, I was like, "Look, generosity to me is not a gender trait. Okay, I already bring a lot to him just by virtue of being here. So he needs to be able to pull his weight because if I'm doing all of that work, I may as well date a woman because at least a woman will pour back into me."
Exactly.
You know, not
Yes.
that women are not selfish too, but I'm more likely to get what I want from any woman than I am from a man. So why would I put all of that effort in for somebody who is not understanding the sacrifices and the efforts that I'm making for them? So I see generosity as the essential to the relationship with me, whether it's in friendship, whether it's in family, whether it is in love. Every single person in my life is an incredibly generous person. I like them that way because I am that way and they're a reflection of me. We've said before that you are the sum total of the five closest people in your life. I like looking at my five closest people and knowing all of them have this quality of generosity. And that is a reflection of me. I have generous people around me. And what I would not want is for them to squander their generosity on the wrong people.
Are you listening, listeners?
The same way I would not want to squander my generosity either. So I don't see it as a gender trait. And I don't see it as like, oh, 50-50 is more equal in this situation because, both of us are making similar amounts of income. Like, your income's not my problem. Since when has it become my problem to save you from the economy? You should have elected me as president.
I mean, hello, and also never forget, this system is designed for men to fail upwards.
Exactly. How are you failing at a game that was made for you? Okay.
This game was made for you. You have all of the resources at your disposal. If you're not succeeding in this, it's because you need to be removed from the gene pool.
And the crazy thing was, she said something along the lines of like, I just don't believe in that performative game playing. And I'm like, if you don't believe in it, you're already losing.
Boom. Oh, thank you, Diana.
Okay? Because whether you want to play this game or not, if you date heterosexual men, you are playing the game. Now you get to determine whether you want to be the winner or the loser of that game. And let me tell you guys, it's not that fun being the loser of that game. Okay? You wind up pregnant or dead or broke.
Oh my gosh. Like, none of these are acceptable options, Diana.
Yeah, it's not like Monopoly where the worst you can feel is pissed off at the person who got all the property up front, because that just makes the game boring. You should hope for a boring life with a man. It's preferable to the alternative.
I was going to say, somebody was asking my aunt. I was talking to my aunt who lives down in Florida. She's not that kind of Floridian, though, thank God.
She's not the Florida man.
No, she's not the Florida man. She's Midwestern, but she was tired of the fucking cold up here. Which, you know what? If you've lived up here for 75 years, you'd be tired of the winters too. So I get it, okay? But we were talking, and she was asking about me and what my life has been like, and what my updates were, and I was like, listen, Auntie, I gotta be honest, my life has never been more boring, and I've never been more content. That is such a victory for me because I led a very exciting life for a very long time. And it was a Chinese curse. Okay, the Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. That sends chills down my spine when I hear it. I'm like,
God.
oh my God, oh, I've been cursed. But when I say I led a very exciting life, it was a cursed life because when I tell people what I've done in my life, people get wide-eyed and they're like, oh man, I always wanted to do that. What was that like? I kind of become a minor celebrity when people find out about my life because it really kind of has been it's a life you write books about, right? But I was absolutely miserable. I was so miserable and so lost and so confused and so vulnerable. And, I'm lucky I wasn't killed, basically. And so now that I live this precious, boring life of mine, I'm like, oh, God is blessed be. It is so amazing. I never knew how amazing boring could be. And she's like, well, it sounds like you've really become an adult. And I was like, yeah, I think that's what it is. I think I've crossed the threshold into official adulthood. That's another vetting point that I think our listeners need to understand. If you are meeting somebody who we've talked about the butterflies before and how that's not actually a good thing. That's actually a sign that your nervous system, your vagal system is sending you warnings that this person is potentially dangerous. What you want is sort of the warm glow and security and safety and calmness. If this person is not inspiring this sort of strong calmness in you, then basically run away, okay? Because if you're looking for the butterflies, if you're looking for this the feeling of your stomach dropping, you are still not fully healed from some of the trauma in your life, and you're not making these decisions from a place of security and health. And we cannot afford to be making these kind of decisions unless they are made from that place of health and security. Okay. Like, if you cannot make it from that place, simply opt out and get some work, like, take some time to do the work. Because when you come back, that's how you're more likely to find somebody who really is to your level.
Yes, and we need to move from a position of reactionary politics to deliberate politics, okay? You need to move from reactionary to deliberation. Because a lot of people are incredibly reactive right now, and you need to be intentional and deliberate with your choices in all aspects of your life. Like, there's nothing that you can sustain if it comes from a place of reaction. If someone told you something that made you feel terrible about yourself, and that day you decided to change and it lasted like a week, that's because it didn't come from you. It came from feeling shame at what somebody else told you. And that's usually not like the solid foundation on which you can build anything. Anything you do from here on out has to be a deliberate choice. That, I think, is the way that we can change things, because we're looking at online discourse right now and we know for a fact that, like, I think a lot of women read like the nasty shit that men say on the internet and think this has to be a minority, right? This has to be like a small pool of them that are just really angry and like really bitter because they can't get laid. And I hope that now you have come to the understanding that that small group of men have been incredibly influential in disseminating their politics to the men around them. Because they're looking for a scapegoat to be angry at, and turns out it's you. You're a very convenient scapegoat.
Women will always be the sacrificial lamb. Always. Always. And forever. Until maybe this era of destruction, until this dark age, the age of iron, concludes and the new golden age dawns, you have to understand that you're always going to be, your neck is always going to be first on the chopping block. When they talk about like eat the rich and they joke about like bringing the guillotine out, they say the rich, but what they really mean is you, female. And so this is why with this online discourse, I used to think like, oh, Rose, this is a small minority. Like, it's a 4chan, Musk Bros, Tater Tots. Like, that's like what, maybe 5% of the population. Well, now that I've seen the votes, even I have had to revise my earlier estimates. I mean, we are looking at least half, if not more, of every race, religion.
Yep. And the truth is, they might not all be that extreme, but there's clearly some parts of this ideology that appeal to them enough to sway their vote, enough to not want to protect you, enough to want to protect their vision of the world or their ideals over yours. So I do think that there has to be some discernment, because you can't afford to get sloppy, right? Sometimes you do have to play dumb to be smart in the situation of like, men are smelling the blood in the water and they know like somebody who's going to come at them directly. I mean, you can't just be satisfied with, oh, I asked him if he voted for Trump and he said he didn't. Now we're dating. So much fun. And then be surprised when you get married that he winds up being like an incredibly trad husband. And you're like, I didn't know that Bob could be like that. I love how we've made Bob like the sacrificial lamb of our
God
politics.
Damn it, Bob.
Stupid Bob. But Bob, Bob is like playing the long game with you. He wanted permanent pussy and there you were. So you can't allow yourself to be used in this manner. You have to be a little bit more strategic about what you disclose and how much you disclose. And unfortunately, I'm sorry to tell you guys, if you don't want to play the game, you can join my leagues of just making your own money and living independently. Some of you don't want to do that. Okay?
I know, which is such a shame because it's really nice out here. Okay. It's really, really nice.
It's very nice. Yeah. Like, that was the crazy thing when I spoke to that woman earlier. She was like, I don't believe in the game playing. And I'm like, by virtue of dating people, you are already doing the game playing. You're just losing. Terribly. I stepped out of the game because I didn't need to play the game. I flipped the fucking board and moved on with my life, and I was like, I don't need to do this shit, So you can do that too if that is what works for you and that is what you think will bring you happiness. But if you are dealing with men at all, then yes, you need to be strategic because your life's outcome depends on it. You can't afford to pick a bad game to play with them because the chances of you losing big is very high.
Game over. Game over.
The house always wins, right? And in this case, the men represent the house. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh. And like, if it's not enough for you to be like, well, I'm willing to take those chances. I'm willing to like take that gamble. Okay, all well and good. But are you planning on having kids with this man? Because that's where, like, listen, if your self-preservation instincts don't kick in, I get it, because we have been taught and they have been beaten out of us for like a millennia. So I get it. Those are really hard instincts. Like Diana said, if you are coming from a reactionary, I'm never gonna, but the next man who asks you on a date, you're like, oh, it might be the one. Like, that's okay. We're not saying there's anything wrong with that. We've all been there. But if that's where you still are, then maybe you need to like use the imaginary future child you're hoping to have. In one of my addiction groups, what do we call it? You play the tape forward. That's what they say. They're like, okay, what happens if you're having a really rough day and you're really craving a drink and you're like, you know what, one can't hurt. What's the worst that could happen? They're like, play the tape forward. What happens? And if you're an addict, you know exactly what happens. Shit goes south in a hurry, right? And you know exactly the ways in which it's going to go south. That's something that you need to start doing as a woman is like play the tape forward, not just for you, but for your future children or even your grandchildren.
And I will say another thing that you can do when you are on dates with men, if you are on dates with them, is something I used to do when I was like, I used to have this habit of like putting them on a pedestal and idealizing them and like coming up with shit that they never said. I was in my total Harley Quinn era of like, oh, he's not a Joker. He's actually Batman. You know? No, they're always Jokers. But what I did was I used to take little covert notes on my phone of like interesting things that he said that I thought were kind of yellow or red flaggy. And if I hit a red flag, I would keep it in there because somehow after the date, I always forget about it. If there was like a lot of positive behavior that overtook the one red flag, I would fixate on the positive behavior and be like, maybe that was just a one off, you know? But like because I bothered to jot it down, I could look back at how egregious I thought that was. You know what I mean? And almost all the time, I made the determination that I was like, yeah, that's not something I can overlook. That was actually a big one. But because of how long the date was, like, you know, in an hour, you can forget things that people tell you. And so you're like, oh, yeah, well, overwhelmingly, it was positive. So maybe that was not a big deal. And you know what? In second thought, I don't really remember what he said anyway. So I'm not sure that I should be making a big deal about it. But normally when this would happen, like if I jotted it down, it usually was weird and something that I had to look at. You know what I mean? Like something I really had to determine and be like, okay, no, actually, you know what? He did say that he was sexually attracted to his niece, and maybe that's weird. Maybe that's really weird, you know? Because he bought me like ice cream from Salt and Straw. I completely forgot about it because I was drowning my happiness in like, you know, caramel crunch or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was gonna say the cortisol, not the cortisol, but the dopamine was going up because you were eating delicious ice cream. But this is such a good point. I love this as a tool or a technique, a strategy, if you will, for our listeners and maybe even for myself, because you know what? I am somebody who likes to take notes. I love a list. Like if you don't like taking notes, maybe you just write a list of like the pros and cons afterwards.
Yeah. I usually do it on my phone quickly because it never looks weird when you're texting, when you're on a date, like quickly. I'm like, oh, I'm just texting my friend, you know, but actually I was writing a note. I was like, oh, my friend's going through a really hard time right now. I'm just texting. That the friend who's going through a hard time is me because I'm trying to figure out his bullshit. You know what I mean? I'm my own friend. I'm like, what did he say? He said that he secretly dreams about his mother and dreams about having sex with her. That's weird. Okay, write that down somewhere, Oedipus. Oedipus over here is telling me about his mom.
Oh my God, it's so brilliant. I love that, Diana. That is so smart. I'm going to take note of that as well. You're right, because I'm a great note taker. And like, of course, my default characteristic is student. Like if I ever have an archetype that I default to, it's the scholar, right? And like a scholar, and this is something my therapist actually said to me before. She's like, Rose, when you go out on a date, because she knew I was always like, are they going to like me? You know, like when am I going to find somebody who just likes me for me? She's like, instead of thinking about it like that, she's like, why don't you look at it as an anthropological expedition where you're going in and you're observing them and you're taking note and you're looking at it from a perspective of what is their behavior like? And then later on, you could review it and start to determine, well, it's not if they like me, do I like them? And that was something that was very helpful to like sort of calm me down off the ledge before I would go on dates. It's like, oh, I'm just going to look at this as like an experiment. This is just me, you know, doing a little research field trip. And I think that's something that can help us like put a little bit of distance. We have to put a little bit of distance between in this situation with men because it's very easy to be overwhelmed by. I mean, I love a strong forearm. I love, you know, the hollow of it. Like, it's so easy when I'm in front of a man to be like, oh, he's so dreamy. But these little things that are under the surface, if you write them down and later on you give yourself time to sort of contemplate them, I think you might see things in a different light. Diana, we are coming up on the end of our discussion today. Have we missed anything? Is there anything else we want to add before we conclude?
I mean, I think the main thing to conclude on is that, you know, people need to realize that we have been through this before as a human collective. This is not the first time at the rodeo. Women have been through this and that much worse, and women will continue to go through this and like a lot worse because men refuse to change. So buckle in, strap in, and be a lot smarter about your choices because they have a negative outcome for you. At the very least, if you're not going to be thinking about the consequences to humanity, think about the personal cost benefit analysis to you. Like, it's gonna suck for you as well. You know what I mean? Like, if you can't persuade people to be like, well, think about the world and think about the planet and start singing Kumbaya and we are the world, like that shit's not gonna happen. But what can happen is you thinking for yourself and being like, I don't really like that. That's not really a vibe for me. I don't want to be in a position where I'm forced to make choices that are going to ultimately result in my long-term unhappiness. Because people at the fundamental level deserve to be happy. You know, we deserve that. It's hard being a human being. Ask the whales.
We haven't come this far. We asked the whales. We haven't come this far. The whales haven't been accompanying us this far for them to bear silent witness to our continued ass hattery.
Yeah, the whales remember, and they're like, "Oh my god!" Like that's why they're screaming and crying. They're like, "Not again, these bullshit humans and their bullshit ways." So buckle in.
Think of the whales. Exactly.
We are going to go through a long-term turbulence, and I think the best thing to do is to have a long-term approach to how you will navigate it, not a short-term reactive approach to it. So yeah.
As the historians would say, you want to take the long view because it's not just in the daily that history is made. It's in the series of days and weeks and months and years that add up that ultimately get us to where we need to be as a human race, as a society. So ladies, buckle the fuck in, wake the fuck up, and scrotes,
Die mad!
die mad.